Welcome to the My Personal Football Coach Youth Soccer Player Development Podcast, episode 57 with Mike Marsh.
Welcome to MyPersonalFootballCoach.com's Soccer Player Development Podcast. Discover all the secrets, hints and tips about soccer player development and soccer coaching from some of the leading figures in world soccer. Here's your host, Saul Isaacson-Hurst.
What's happening, guys? Welcome back to another show. Today we've got a fantastic guest for you. Really privileged that Mike Marsh has joined us to talk about his coaching journey. Mike Marsh is the assistant manager at Swansea City in the Championship, working under Steve Cooper. Also previously worked at the FA, was an in-possession coach and famously won the Under-17s World Cup as assistant coach. Previously to that, he was worked under David Wagner at Huddersfield and also Brendan Rodgers at Liverpool as a first-team coach, and previously having stints in the academy there as a coach as well. Obviously, he also had a really illustrious playing career, playing for Liverpool, West Ham, and Galatasaray, to name a few. Really privileged, like I say, to get Mike on the show. First met Mike on an FA course, maybe 2005 or something like that. Really friendly, loads of banter. But as you get to know him, you find out he's a real deep thinker about the game, real student of the game. Like I say, this is really interesting, a real gripping hour of chat about football for someone who's really been there and done that, not only as a player, as a coach as well. So a real class act, and I know you're going to enjoy this one. Just a week left now to the launch of the My Personal Football Coach Virtual Academy. You've got 1 week left to sign up. This is for players who want to take their game to the next level, who maybe want to supplement their team training with experience, what it's like to be in a Premier League academy in terms of learning from some of the best youth developers in world soccer. We're pitching it at basically 12 onwards. That's how the tutorials and the classroom sessions are going to be looking at. But really is a complete player development package. So if you want to support your child's development with a first-class player development program, make sure you check it out. Remember, it's the only virtual academy in the world where you're going to get technical, tactical, psychological and physical development. So really excited. Like I said, we've got some top practitioners involved, some of the best youth developers in world football. There's only a few places left, so like I said, on the 30th of November this kicks off. It's a 3-month course, just a few places left. Myself, Mark Rees, ex-Man City Academy coach. We've got Scott Jekyll-Day, forward coach, used to work at QPR in Tottenham, works with loads of pros now individually as a forward specialist. Glenn Hicks, ex-Tottenham Hotspur Academy, top drawer as well. Simon Brundish, who's going to bring the physical corner to the table, one of the best S&C guys in the game. And also then we've got obviously Steve Salas, who's going to be providing weekly mindset sessions for the players. So really excited about that. You want to find out more, you can check out the link in the bio. Like I said, only a few places left, and obviously this is kicking off next week on the 30th of November, so don't miss out. So Mike Marsh, welcome to the show.
Cheers, mate.
Can you just give us a brief outline of your playing and coaching journey up to this point, please, mate?
I'll have a go, mate. Could take a while. So my playing career was varied, if you like. I started off at Liverpool. I went to Liverpool late, so I didn't join them until after I was 18. So I played for the local side. I was offered a trial and signed late, so I didn't join until I was 18. I spent 6 years at Liverpool before leaving in '93. Joined West Ham. Left West Ham, went to Coventry. So played for 3 Premier League teams. Moved out to Turkey, played for Galatasaray for a short spell, and then come back to play for Southend United in the Championship for a couple of years. And then unfortunately was hit by a knee injury that forced me to retire at 28. From then I went into playing non-league football, where my coaching career really began. So I played for numerous clubs in the conference. I was taking player coaches roles, etc. So I played for Southport, Barrow, Kidderminster, Boston, Accrington, Bearscough. I was doing various player coaches roles. That led me to taking coaching jobs in the conference when he eventually packed in football. So I've done a little bit of coaching at Southport and Northwich Victoria. And that led me, I used to do Preston Kids when I was younger. So I used to do the 14s as well as coaching in the conference. And then I went to join Liverpool. I'd done the 16s, 18s and the seniors at Liverpool. I left there, went to Huddersfield. I was first team coach at Huddersfield before moving on to England. I'd done the 17s and 18s with England. I left England to join Swansea about 18 months ago, and that's currently where I'm at.
Wow. So yeah, quite a illustrious journey already. So we're going to try and pinpoint. Obviously, I'm quite interested in your work particularly with the youth players, because a lot of our coaches work with youth players. So what was the first one? Was that working with Preston? Was that with the Preston Academy?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I used to do 13 Preston as well as coaching all to Victoria in the conference.
Yeah.
So I used to coach Northwich in the day and the kids at Preston in the evening. And then we'd have a game at Northwich on a Saturday, and we'd obviously have a game with Preston on a Sunday.
What was that like then in terms of coaching? How do you find coaching young players rather than coaching adults, or playing with adults?
It's different. Your goals and your objectives have got to be different for young players rather than adults. Obviously, you're coaching adults, it's results, and you're expected to win games of football and get 3 points. So it's a different agenda, but younger players, it's their development and how far they can go as an individual in a team game, really. So you have to tailor it around that.
But I'm interested, in terms of that first experience, what were the challenges for you? Did you find it difficult adapting? Did you have to change, your communication skills and the way you delivered? What were the main things that stood out for you in that, looking back at that first experience with the Preston Academy?
Yeah, but do you know what? Looking back, rightly or wrongly, and it's frowned on these days, I used to join in quite a bit. Yeah. So it's I was really fit, having not long finished football, and I could join in. I used to be part of the session, not in the middle of it, but on the outside, and coach players from within the session, which is, to be fair, mate, has stuck with me to where I'm coaching now. I do like to be involved in the session and get a feel for how it looks inside the pitch rather than outside the pitch. But it's that's a little bit frowned upon these days, really, about me coaching position of where I actually set myself up.
Yeah, but I think it's different for you because obviously you played at the highest level and you can still play. I remember when we first met, you were, I think just before you got your Liverpool job, we were at the Kiel and the course, and you were, you're running the sessions there for us, showing out. So I think it's different because it's like modelling, aren't you? You're modelling, you can go in and still model, what you want at the highest level compared to maybe other coaches who can't do that. Yeah,
well, a picture paints 1,000 words, doesn't it? So if you can go in and show them what you want rather than try and explain it, I think it's a better option. I think that is a good asset to have as an ex-player, to still be able to execute a skill that you're asking them to do, which, as you will know from your videos.
Yeah. So tell us about then the first job at Liverpool in the work on the 16s. How did that come about? And tell us a little bit about that in terms of what that was like. Was going into the club that you played for previously?
I was, as I said, I was working at Preston. I got a phone call. There's going to be a rejig at the academy in Kirkby. There's going to be a few staff losing their jobs, and they were looking at employing a different set of staff. I was asked would I come along for a chat. Went along, spoke to Frank McParland. He asked me would I be interested in the role, which I obviously was. Steve Cooper, who's the manager at Swansea now, was the under-16s head coach. I had a chat with Steve. He asked me would I come in and assist him with the under-16s, and it went from there.
And what were your first impressions in there in terms of working with Coops there and stuff, and in terms of the initial things that stood out for you?
It was different from when I'd been here previously. Where the academy is based in Kirkby is my hometown. So when I was growing up, that was public playing fields that being turned into a first grade top end academy, which the first team have actually just moved to this week. So it was slightly different from what I'd seen it when I was a kid. And I used to remind the players every day when they come in that they're actually blessed to be in an environment that they're in, because when I was playing there, you had to dodge the broken glass and the dog muck on the grass. So it was a slightly different environment.
I mean, but talk about in terms of what did you see that was different in terms of the way the sessions were being delivered, the philosophy? Were there anything different in there? Was it just the same? Liverpool is old.
No, it was different. We had a new technical director in place So we had a lad called Pep Segura, who was the technical director, and he was assisted by Rodolfo Borrell. Pep's went back to Barcelona and ended up being their technical director, and Rodo's assistant manager at Man City. So we had a couple of guys come from Barcelona who had their own ideas of how you were expected to coach, and they chunked it up for us, really. It was a 3 or 4 part session: technical, tactical, game related stuff, and finish with a game at the end. And that was how you had to coach. You could put your own slant on it, but they put the ideas forward, and then you were let loose and run with it, really. But it was. Can
you give us an example of that session, what that looked like, and give us like a typical session, what that might be?
Yeah, it sticks with us to this day. So you could have a technical exercise which should lead into a possession. A game-related practice would follow that, and then it'd be a game. So it was a logical sequence where a technical exercise would lead into a possession. If you could link it, it'd be great, and so much the better. That would lead into the game-related exercise, that areas that you want to improve on, or what was coming up at the weekend. And obviously the game at the end where you can practice what you've been preaching for the past 35, 45 minutes.
So give us an example of a technical, what might a technical thing look like in that beginning part?
Well, it would depend on what the proposed technical exercise was for that week. So all the technical exercises were passing, dribbling, shooting, etc. What the focus was on, is it what the game plan would be, and what you were trying to focus on for that week. So you're expected to link it back right from the very first kick of the ball right to the end of the practice. And what was good practice is that you had to have all your session plans in, you had to have them on the technical director's desk, and you had to be able to explain what you were doing and what it was used for. So it was a real good test of your coaching ability. It stopped you from being lazy, and you had to justify every element of your practice.
Did you find any? What were the challenges in there? Were there any challenges about that in terms of, changing the way you've been coaching previously, or working within those conditions, or was it just literally, it was pretty similar to what you've been doing?
No, I really enjoyed it. As I said, when I was at Preston, I used to tend to join in, and we used to just play football with the occasional tactical element. But that was the level I was working at. I turned up at Liverpool. I've got a technical director from Barcelona who's put more demands on me, which I really enjoyed. I've found as time's gone by that I really enjoyed the practice design, and I'm putting things in place where sessions run smoothly, and there's a reason and a rationale for everything that you delivered in every session. So it's something that I really enjoyed and I've took forward with.
Okay, then talk a little bit about then moving into the first team. How did that happen? How did that come about?
I was I'd done a couple of years with the 16s as an assistant coach, head coach, and then I took the 18s on as head coach. And then when Brendan was given a job, I received a phone call off the academy director, Frank McParland, asking would I be interested in going to have a look and help Brendan out, because it was a tournament year that year, and a lot of internationals were arriving back late, and he was asking, sorry about the noise, sorry. And he was asking, could someone come along and help him, because a lot of the young players would have to be going up to Melwood. So I was invited up because a lot of the seniors were missing, a lot of young players went up. I went up there to help basically familiarise Brendan with who the young players were. I was then invited to pre-season tour in America. So we spent 2 weeks out in Boston. On the way back on the plane from Boston, Brendan asked me would I be interested in stepping up and taking the job on a permanent basis. I went from there, really.
I'm always interested to, some people talk about how football's evolved or changed. What are the main differences between when you were a player there coming through and then that time then, as a assistant coach?
Well, the main differences was we didn't really get coached when we were playing there. We were expected to sink or swim, really. We didn't do a lot of coaching. It was a lot of small-sided games, and that was it, really. We played 5-a-side for the majority of the time. So other than playing 11v11s in games, there's a lot of small-sided games, and there wasn't a lot of coaching going on. There was information given, and, but there wasn't a lot of wasn't a lot of stuff that goes on now with opposition analysis and set plays, etc., etc. You were thrown in and expected to stand your ground. If you could, you played. If you couldn't, you didn't, because now they get mountains of information, as opposed to what we used to get, which was next to nothing. You were expected to work it out for yourself.
Right.
So it is different. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I think there's a happy medium where, we could give players less information and expect them to make decisions for themselves. But I think them days are gone. I think the players expect it now. You've got to give them as much information as you can to help them perform on game day.
Interesting. And tell us a bit about then your role specifically in terms of what would you your day-to-day or your week be like, in delivering sessions, and how's that work?
You're talking about Liverpool now?
Yeah, Liverpool, just reflecting on that first time.
Yeah, Liverpool. Yeah, it was difficult really the first year because Brendan was a very much hands-on coach. So he used to take a lot of the sessions himself, and then you had me and Colin Pascoe with his assistants. We used to take the sessions after the games, if you like, before the lead into the next game. So Brendan, he'd lead most of the sessions leading into games, and we'd take sessions after games, which I found a bit frustrating after spending 3 years at the academy taking every session with my team. So I found that a little bit frustrating. But about 12 months in, I think Brendan got a little bit of trust in my ability as a coach, if you like, give me a little bit more to do, and I've obviously got my teeth into it, and then you find a bit more of a rhythm in the day-to-day stuff with the seniors, and then you feel a bit more comfortable with obviously a bit more responsibility.
Tell us a bit about then your practice design and your delivery. What were the challenges, and how is that delivering when you got those superstars in the team compared to when you were working with 16s or previously?
Yeah, nothing changes really, mate. It was my practice design is always based around a player's area of development. How can he get better? How can he improve his strengths? Or what he's going to come up against and face at a weekend in a game. So it's as simple as that. Is can we incorporate into the session the needs of the player, whether it's area development, improve his strengths, or in the game. And if that's not in the session, I think I'm selling the players short. So I try and make sure that them three parts are always in the session, at least one of them.
So tell us about that process then. I mean, so you got a player, for instance, like Sterling, who was at the club at the time. How do you identify his areas of development while weighing up the other players in the squad, and how much time tell me about that process, how you're identifying and deciding who's going to be working on what in the session and building it into your team sessions? Yeah,
well, it's, as I said, it was Brendan would take a lot of the games leading up, but we'd split groups. So we'll have defenders, attackers and midfielders. And in the main, take the midfielders. Brendan would do the defenders and Pascal do the attackers. So you're responsible for your own units, really, and giving them ideas of what the opposition are going to offer you, spaces where you can expose them, and highlighting areas. Say, for instance, if they don't track back, and the likelihood is you're going to be able to get finishes arriving at the edge of the box, that type of stuff. So you're just looking at the upcoming fixture. Here's what they're going to offer you. I think we need to practice this, etc., etc. You need to be arriving in these areas if you want to take advantage of what the opposition are going to give us. But regarding the likes of Raheem and players like that, you're just highlighting. You might be saying to him, listen, you want to be making out to win runs to score goals rather than making runs to cross the ball. The second centre half on your side is not the quickest. You might be running off his shoulder, and letting him practice and giving him real time opportunity to practice in the game before the game.
Interesting, and it's quite, because you have that unique experience of obviously playing and then working with young players and then working in the first team as well. How does it marry up in terms of the priorities? In terms of you talked about when you were playing, it was sink or swim. How much time do you get to develop the players while they're at that top end? And how much opportunity do they get? And if it doesn't work, they don't get the opportunity maybe.
Well, it's at that top end is as much as the player wants it, really. Is the players who are playing are generally playing and then recovering. And then the players who are trying to get into the team do a lot of that work that I've just spoke about. But once they're in the team, it's difficult to maintain that because of the games programme. If you're coaching at a team at the top end of the Premier League, you're playing every 3 days. So whether it's Premier League football, Champions League, Europa League, League Cup games, they come thick and fast. So if you're in the team, once you're playing, you're recovering. So you just, it's maintenance work, really. But the ones who aren't in the team, that's where you've got a real opportunity to focus on the areas of development or making them better and developing the strengths.
So I mean, so there's opportunities for those players to do extras. I mean, do they do stuff after training, that sort of thing, and come to you and say, look, I want to work on this?
Yeah, well, I had my hip replaced 3 years ago, and the reason behind it really was I used to spend an hour on a daily basis with small groups of players developing their needs. Really, they come to me and say, I want to work on this X, Y, and Z, and I'd try and incorporate it with 2 or 3 players, just so it wasn't individual based and it could look like a game really. So people wanted to do cross, and people who wanted to do heading or the longer range passing, I'd try and incorporate that practice for the 3 of them, and that'd be on a daily basis. That was for 3 years. So unfortunately, that was why my hip needed replaced. So there's a lot of it.
What would you say that the main difference is between professionals now at the top end and when you were there, when you were playing for Liverpool?
Well, one word you've just said, there's the more professional. So it's the differences. Yeah, they eat, sleeping, everything's football now, isn't it? 100%. You know, the attitude to training, the work ethic, everything's improved. They want to be the best they can be, and they've got access to it. So if you fall short in today's age, with all the facilities and information and the staff that you've got at your disposal, I think you would.
And what do you think? What would be the main takeaways working under Brendan at that time? As for you as a coach,
main takeaway, Brendan's he's a real people's person. You know, he's good. He got the players on side. Very good man manager. You know, built relationships with the players. So it's so yeah. So that'd be the main thing I'd take away from Brendan, is that he's like a lot of top end managers. He's very good with players on a personal level.
Okay, cool. So then tell us about you leave Liverpool. What was your next? Tell us about the next coaching role you took up.
I went to Huddersfield with David Wagner. Yeah, which was an interesting role for me. I was offered a couple of roles in the Championship actually, and then I was asked would I be interested in going to speak to Huddersfield. Knowing that David was coming in from Borussia Dortmund's second team to take charge, and I thought I'd like to have a little go at that because I was interested in what I could pick up from him, what I could learn.
And so how long did you spend with David Wagner at Huddersfield?
I was there. I went in September or October and left at the end of that season. What had happened when I left Liverpool? I'd done some part-time work with the FA, working with England, and I was told that if the jobs became available on a permanent basis, I'd have a good chance of being successful if I applied. But in the meantime, the Huddersfield job became available, so I took the Huddersfield job, and shortly afterwards, I went for the job interview with England and was offered a position.
Cool. So let's just wind back then. Let's just wind back to the Huddersfield role. David Wagner, you talked about, what would you pick up from him? Tell us then, what did you pick up from him? What was that experience like working for David, who comes from different footballing culture? What were the main differences, contrasts, and things from that experience?
He's very good. I kept him very simple messages across. Didn't overcomplicate things. He had a way of playing with a 4-2-3-1. Everyone knew the jobs. In and out of possession. Didn't complicate it from week to week. Really good, simple messages, consistent. What he was really good at, which at the time we needed it because we didn't win as many as we'd have liked, was getting over defeat. He just packed defeat and moved on as if it never happened. So it's he was outstanding at being able to park that and move on to the next game.
Was there anything tactically new he brought to the table that maybe new things that he showed you and the other coaches?
No, he'd come in obviously from Dortmund. All the stuff he brought in I'd seen before, but delivered in a different way. It was just how he delivered the message. What he asked you to do was very simple. Whether you were defending, defending from the front, the front three or the front two. Same message every week. If these play like this, we play like this. And he was and he stuck with that consistent right the way through.
And what about like session design, anything like that? He's delivering sessions. What anything interesting you picked up from those?
He was mad on transition, so he's like a lot of German coaches. He's really hot on counter attack football. So he was a lot of his sessions that he delivered had an element of transition in, and most of them the focus would be on transition. So he wasn't overly concerned on building and creating attack. He sometimes actually preferred you to give the ball away so you can counter attack and counter press.
Do you think that counter pressing, that thing's one of the major differences to?
Very much a German thing and a Borussia Dortmund.
Sorry, Matt, I lost you there a bit. So do you think that you talk about that being a Borussia Dortmund thing, German thing? Is that another, one of the main differences from football when you were playing? Is that high pressing game that's now sort of such a common part of football these days?
I've got to be honest with you. Having come through at Liverpool, it wasn't so much of a culture shock to me as a player, because Liverpool were pressing the life out of teams back in the day also. And it was something that you were expected to do was, when we press, we all go together, you turn it over, you come in behind the press. So as I said, I didn't learn anything new from it. It was just delivered in a different way. But yeah,
I suppose that's the interesting thing. Sorry, Marsh, to interrupt you, mate. I suppose that's interesting, though, isn't it? How you deliver it. Like you said, you were like expected to know it, and so the intricacies of pressing high and teaching that to young players we're going on in the FA. Is that more of a challenge than that might be?
Yeah, well, do you know what? Back in the day, the players taught you how to do it. So it wasn't so much the coaches coaching, it was the players coaching. So if you came in, you were a young player, and you were in the team and you didn't know your job, the players would teach you, come here, go there, do this, do that, wait. So the players coached you. The coaches never really coached you. These days, obviously, that's changed. The coach is being given a bigger role and more responsibility, and he's expected to have the answers for the players. So he sets the players up, tells them what the strategy is, and then it's up to the players to deliver for them. But back in the day, the players coached you, and if you didn't pick up the cues off the players, as I said, you soon found out and didn't play that often.
Do you think that way is almost, like you said, figuring it out yourself supports players because they become a little bit more independent and decision makers, like the big key word these days?
What I said earlier, I think there's a happy medium. I don't think you should give the players all the answers because it's not a theoretical exercise. You've got to go out and practice it. Sometimes it looks different on the grass than it does in a classroom. So, if you can paint a few pictures and let them know what they're expecting, I think it benefits the player. But I don't think you should give them every scenario that's going to become available because it's too time consuming. You lose engagement with the player. So for me, you paint a picture or two. So you might come up against this. This could be a strategy to expose it. But I don't think you can give them everything. I think there's got to be a happy medium somewhere along the line.
And so there was a lot of controversy, or when David Wagner got the job, because what's your thoughts on people talking about a lot of foreign coaches coming in, and the people saying maybe they're bringing something different to the table than the English coaches. What's your opinion on that?
Well, they do bring something different, don't they? Coaching's coaching, so they're not going to be a million miles different from English coaches on what they actually deliver. Sometimes where they are different is the mentality and how they go about things. The biggest thing I learned from David was how to accept defeat and move on. He didn't blink if we lost. As soon as that day was gone, he moved on. I moved on to the next game where, it keep me awake thinking, how have we lost that? Now do we get better, etc., etc. For him, it was accept it and, move on. We got another game on Wednesday. So that was the biggest thing I learned from him as a manager. He was outstanding at it. So
talk about then you go for the job at the FA. Why did you want to go and work with the FA and not carry on working in the Championship or the Premier League?
Well, I've been on a number of courses at St George's at the FA. I've got the pro licence, so I've been on every course that they can chuck at you. So I haven't been in the building, looked at it, thinking I'd like to coach at the FA, but I didn't think I'd ever get the opportunity. And then when I left Liverpool, I got a phone call asking me would I be interested in coming in on a part-time basis, which I did, and I really enjoyed it. I thought, you know what, I'd like to give that a go if full-time position ever become available. So when I went to Huddersfield and I was offered the job at the FA, I told David, I said, listen, the FA have offered me a position and I wanted to accept it. I had a 6 months notice period on my contract at Huddersfield. We had a bit of umming and ahhing. He wasn't keen on me leaving, having not been there too long. So my answer to him was, I think I could get a job in the Championship in the future. I don't think this opportunity will come back to work with the national teams. I said, so if I don't accept it now, I might never get a go in the future. So that was me rationale behind it. So that's what I done. I accepted a position with the FA and I left Huddersfield. And to be fair, once I left the FA, I'm now back working in the Championship with Swansea. So I found out what I said was true.
And what was the role you took with the FA then? What was your job title?
My job title, I was an in-possession specialist for the under-17s.
Right. So
they had a different model of working at the FA. So we had an in-possession specialist, out-of-possession specialist, and a head coach. Fortunate for me, my head coach was Coops, who I've worked with, as you know, for a long time now at Liverpool and at the FA and now Swansea. So he was my head coach, and it was my responsibility to develop, implement the in-possession strategy for games and tournaments for the 17s and 18s.
Okay, just tell us a bit about then. You said you like when you're in the building, you thought, you liked the sort of feeling of this, the culture. Tell us a bit about the culture at the time. We've spoken to other people who were involved with the FA, the new DNA project, in full fat, in full flow. Tell us a bit about that. What was that like? First impressions of the culture there.
Yeah, well, it reminded me a lot of when I first went to Liverpool, when Frank McParland changed all the staff and brought new staff in inside a new way of working. So it looked very much like that. Dan Ashworth was the big driver of what was going on with the development teams at Matt Crocker. I thought, you know what, I wouldn't mind jumping on at the start to see where this goes. So it was really good. You had to be accountable for your job, what you delivered. Standing up in front of a group of national coaches and said, we've done this, this, and this. This is why. These are the outcomes, etc., and myself hoping to be criticised on all levels by different coaches. So it was a brilliant learning curve for me. I really enjoyed it. It was really successful. We won the World Cup. I'm sure they won the Euros on a couple of occasions. So it was it was a brilliant experience. I wouldn't have swapped. I'm actually I'm glad that I went. As daft as it sounds, I left to join the FA. Huddersfield got promoted, and people thought I'd be disappointed. I was delighted for Huddersfield that they got promoted, but I was delighted for myself that I was working in an environment where I could learn so much.
So tell us some of the things you did learn. How did you how did you develop? What was those things you picked up from being in that environment?
Well, people have a different way of doing things. Obviously, you're coming together. There's different age groups, and there's an in-possession specialist for every age group. So you'd sit down and we discuss what my methods were as opposed to theirs. And then we'd have to put it out really to the group, because we had to build a document of how we play, which they use in the national programs now for the education and stuff like that. So it's how we play, finish, put all the language alongside it, and clips and footage from training and games, and what does it mean to be an England coach, an England player, and how does it look really? So it was there was a lot of responsibility, and to be fair, with the quality in the building, you had to be really good at your job just to stay on an even keel. So it was great. So
tell us a bit about your role then as a possession coach. How did that work in terms of, for instance, you got an international break, you got a few days with the players, with the boys. How did you work within that group, and when did you get your opportunity on the grass? How did your relationship work with the head coach? Well, luckily enough is that we didn't have an out-of-possession coach for a while, so it was basically a two-man team. So it was me and Coops. So I do the in-possession, he'd do the out-of-possession, and it was very much like we worked previously, but we just take responsibility when we were off the grass for both sides of the game. But while we were on the grass, it was what we normally do really. I'd coach up into the game day -1, and then Coops would take over for the tactical element before we play the game. So it didn't really change that much. The biggest
The biggest difference was what you had to do off the pitch, which is for the in possession specialist, if you like, was you had to report back to the other people in the group and obviously the senior management team about what you do and why, what the objectives were and where they met. So on the grass, it didn't change that much for me. Off the pitch, there's a massive difference about justifying your work to another group of staff.
And tell us something, so for instance, what would a typical session look like on the pitch? Would it just be the same as you've done everywhere else? And what's the typical session with the boys look like in possessions with the 17s?
Well, again, it always come back to the game that was coming up, an area where we fell short in the last game, or the players' development needs, whether they're a weakness or a strength, and it does relate back to them who the focus was on in the group, whether it was a team focus, whether it was on an individual, and it always come back to that. And to be fair, we've got a group of staff who challenge each other. It's my job to put the sessions together, and then I'll be quizzed in a technical meeting about why we're doing this, what's the rationale, who does it benefit, etc. And we'd always go down that road. We'd meet before training, deliver the session, we'd meet after training, and we'd be quizzed again. Did it work? What worked well? Even better if, etc. So it was a real challenge.
So who would then be quizzing you? Who'd be like your line manager in effect, then saying, challenging you on your, keeping on your toes, as it were? Yeah,
well, it was everyone who was involved in the session. So you'd have a fitness coach, the head coach, the goalkeeping coach. We'd all sit down, we'd all have a cup of coffee after training. And to be fair, it wasn't friendly, but we are all friends. But it wasn't friendly, it was a challenge to justify your rationale if you wanted to get something put into a session that wasn't agreed with, and then you just had to cross your fingers that it worked, because they're coming after you if it was a mess. So it was it was a real good environment to be in, a real challenge, because you had to justify everything that was on the grass. But I think I picked that up from when I went back to Liverpool, the academy at the second time, working under Pep Segura, where I knew that he'd be coming after me at the weekend if I'd done something that he didn't agree with, and I'd have to have a rationale behind it.
Interesting. So tell us a bit about then the going on to win the World Cup. Tell us a bit about the preparation for that. How did that work in terms of you as your role then? How are you preparing the boys for that tournament when you're going to be playing lots of different teams, lots of different styles of play?
We'd had a good prep for it. We'd played the Euros in Croatia in, I think it was May. We lost in the final on penalties to Spain. So we had a month in Croatia. We played every game, went to the final, lost on penalties. And then with that same team that had qualified for the World Cup, we had a couple of games in prep, and then we went to India in September, October time with the same group of players. Fortunate enough to get the final again, met Spain again. 2-0 down after half an hour, ended up coming back and winning 5-2. So we'd had good prep in Croatia for what a tournament looked like. We knew we had a good team. I think a big thing for me when you're out of coach is knowing that I've got good players, and when to step away and let them play. Well, I think you can do more of a hindrance than a help sometimes. That was definitely a group of players that you could leave alone and just point them in the right direction. So less information, the better for them.
Interesting, because you talked previously when you were at Liverpool, and the difficulty with having such a tight fixture list. What was that like in the tournament when you got game after game, and you're sort of trying to maintenance and that sort of thing?
It's really tough. International football is tough, as people are finding out at the minute with the injuries coming back from the recent international break. But we're fortunate enough. We had a coach who's now followed us to Swansea, Dave Tivy, who's excellent physical strength and conditioning coach, outstanding. So he'd give us guidance in what we could and couldn't do. We got a game every 3 or 4 days. You're out there for 35 days. So it's keeping everyone fit and available, and ready for peak performance. It's something that you don't pick up overnight. International football, I think it takes a good 12 months to learn how to get into a rhythm of it, really. It's by the time we got to India, we were ready and we were good to go. So we finished that tournament. We had everyone fit and available, and in peak performance for that game against Spain before we came home. So we planned right, the prep was right, and obviously that was justified with the
and so tell us a little bit about then, you mentioned before that group, that pretty much, that really unique set of players you had with you, Foden, Sancho, Brian Brewster, Kirby, Tashana Glabouf, those so many top young technical players, Hudson-Odoi, list goes on. What was that like working with that group and challenging them, and what were those personalities like, and what was it like for you? What are the challenges for you, with those sorts of guys?
The challenges, obviously, with a group of players like that, you're expected to go far in each tournament. Working with them on a daily basis is great. I'd obviously not long been out of working at senior football with Liverpool, with your Gerrards, all that. So I was used to working with top end players, but to come into an environment like that with kids who are desperate to win, it was brilliant. They were all ears. As I said, we didn't go in for overkill with information. We knew they were good players. We knew we were a good team. We used to give them pointers of where we can hurt the opposition. Highlighted. You can expose them in here if you get it there often enough. And because they're such good players, more often than not, that was the case. So you didn't have to do. I'd be lying if I said we coached them into being World Cup winners. We just had to point them in the right direction.
And tell us about that game of Spain then, that famous game, 2-0 down. What was that like? What are your thoughts on the sideline when you're losing 2-0 in that game against Spain and you're coming back?
As you know what, we were playing really well, as daft as it sounds. So we're in India. We're playing in front of packed crowds. There's 60,000 people in the stadium. And we're 2-0 down. But we're playing really well. I'm thinking, come on, just give us a break here. And luckily enough, we got a goal back just before half time. Goes in at 2-1. And the players were doing their own team talk about we're well in the games, no need to panic, get the next goal, we're going to win it. So that was the players, really. We're giving the information that we was going to give. So we didn't really have to back it up with anything else. Just show a bit of belief, make sure you get the next goal. Don't make it too hard for yourself. If you go 3-1 down, it's going to be a mountain to climb. Got the next goal early, and to be fair, I'm comfortable winning. But if you look on players on both teams who are now playing senior football and the level that they're playing at, you realise now how much of a high level game it was.
Interesting. And then so tell us about the final then, and what was that like in terms of you on the sideline, the coach, you winning? What sort of feelings were going through your head, and how proud were you of your boys and yourselves and Coops and everyone?
Do you know what? I was made up for the lads because it was an absolute. It was a dagger in the heart when we were in Croatia, because we lost with the last kick of the game. So what had happened? We're winning 2-1, and they've managed to get a corner which the keeper's come up forward and goes in the box, and we managed to get a first contact, and the goalkeeper's let it go to his hands and go to a penalty shootout. Our goalkeeper's in tears. He's distraught because I think he's cost us the Euros. Goes to the shootout and we lose on the shootout. But we deserve to win the tournament. The lads have put so much effort in. But fair play to Spain on the day. Whoever wins deserves it, don't they? And then when we meet in the final, we're 2-0 down. You think, oh, come on, they're playing as well as ever, and this is a bit unjust. But then they put the foot on the gas, to be fair, and ran on 5-2 winners. It was a brilliant experience. To go and win the World Cup at whatever level as a coach, it's an outstanding achievement and something that I'll remember for the rest of my life. It's right up there with anything I've achieved. It's brilliant achievement. And not only that, a brilliant experience and such an enjoyable experience in a country as different as India. It was everything I hoped and wished international football would be.
So then tell us about then your move to Swansea, how that came about and that transition.
Moved to Swansea, I was on holiday in France. I'd gone on to France with my wife and I got a phone call off Coops. And he said, I think I've got a chance of getting a Swansea job. Would you be interested? I said, yeah, I think it's run its course with the FA. I think I've done what I come here to do. And if you get the job, yeah, I would be interested. He rings me back an hour or so later. He said, yeah, I think I'm right in the frame, I need to know whether it's yeah or no. I said, yeah, count me in. So that's how it happened. I come home a couple of days later, got in the car, met up with Coops, drove down to Swansea, signed a contract, and we were off and running, off to Spain for a pre-season camp.
So tell us about then those, what are the challenges, your first experiences of going back into, day-to-day football, coming back out of international football, and then going into a new club? What was that like? A new club that you hadn't been before, new players, getting motivating those sorts of guys.
Yeah, it's always difficult when you come into a new club as a coach, isn't it? Because obviously the players are looking at you as if to say, does he know what he's talking about? Trying to convince them and give them the confidence that you can coach and you can help them win games. But that didn't take long. We got off to a good start in pre-season and during the league programme. So it never takes long to settle in a football clubs, especially when you've been to different football clubs as a player or a coach. How to manage the transition and how to manage yourself and the relationships with others.
I mean, you've obviously been working with Coots for quite a while. Was it then just business as usual? Like you said, you do the in-possession stuff, you do the out-possession stuff, or any sort of unique sort of things you did there? Anything different to your usual working relationship?
No, in the main, as I said, when we were at the FA, I'd be in possession, he'd be out of possession, but that'd only be off the grass, really. On the grass, it's in the main, I'd take the lead up to the game, and then he'd take game day -1. It's pretty much what we do here. I'll take the lead up. So we play on Wednesday, I'll take the Thursday, he'll take the Friday, and we have a game on a Saturday. So not much has changed really from the working relationship that we had at the FA or when we were at Liverpool. So we divvy the work up. He takes the tactical element, the game day -1, and then we we've also got a third coach in Alan Tate, who's got his first team coach at the middle of last season. He's been a real bonus because he's played about 500 games for Swansea, and he brings a tactical element to the coaching team. He's an outstanding defender, and he adds another element for us.
In terms of your work then, working with the guys there, how much of your work is, this is what we do, this is these are our strengths compared to, this is what your position do, this is what their strengths are, how can we, react to that? So, how do you sort of approach that sort of training?
Yeah. Well, if you're looking at a percentage, it would probably be a 60-40, 70-30 in favour of what we're going to do against them. We do highlight what the opposition are going to do, but when we do highlight it and we practice what the opposition are going to do, it's then with a view to what we do when we get the ball back. So we're trying to cover both bases. So we don't just put sessions on where we have to defend and it stops. We have to defend and then there's a transition to what it looks like once we get the ball. So there's always two sides of the game for us. Attacking and defending and a transition in between. And how does it look once you get the ball back, whether you're defending or attacking? And
what's it like dealing with the pressure at working that level compared to where you've worked previously? Well, for instance, at England,
Truth be told, there was no real pressure at England, other than the pressure that you put on yourself to deliver to the group of coaches that you've put on. You've put on sessions that you can justify. Really, it's under 17s, under 18s football. In the grand scheme of things, it's development football. So there's no real pressure other than what you'd expect from yourself. Obviously, it's different when you're playing senior football and you're playing for 3 points and you're on the telly every week, whether you're on Quest or live on Sky, etc. So there's a different pressure that comes with senior football. Development football for me, there shouldn't be any pressure. I think if there is any pressure, I think it manages to find a way to the players and they don't perform as well as they should.
So tell us a bit about the pressure then. What's that like, dealing with the pressure then day to day at working a championship and needing to perform and get those 3 points?
Do you know what? It's not a pressure that you're thinking a pressure of the job. It's more a workload issue than a pressure. We've just had an international break. We've got a game tomorrow, and then we go right through till January the 2nd. I think we've got 12 games in 40 days, or there's a game every 3 days right up until January. So it's the workload is an issue, obviously, because you've got to deliver your sessions to get the lads prepped for the game, and then you've got to keep the lads who aren't playing ready to go in the second group, if you like, ready to play if they're needed. So it's the workload is the biggest pressure that we face, I think.
And tell us a bit about, I mean, you've obviously, you're known now at giving youngsters opportunities. You had a lot of young players in the last couple of seasons playing with you guys. Tell us about that. And obviously, you've obviously had the relationship with them because your time at England and those sorts of things. Is there any added pressure to that? And what's it like having those younger players around the squad?
It's been great, to be fair. It's great having young players around the squad, especially top end ones. So we had Ryan in last year. He obviously come in, done really well for us. Conor Gallagher, who's again, he done really well for us. We got a couple in this year. Mark has been outstanding from Chelsea. Morgan Gibbs-White's come in from Wolves. All players who played for us in the Under-17s World Cup. Brought Joel Latibotier in from Manchester City as another young player. But we've got our own here at Swansea. Joe Rodden's just moved on to Tottenham. Ben Cabango's in the team at 20. You know, so we've got young players. Liam Cullen, a striker. You know, he's jumping at the bit for a chance. So we're keen to give young players a go. You know, it's we've come from a background in academy football and development football where we want to see what the next stage is for the players. And I think the more you can get in, the better. But obviously, you need to supplement it with a bit of experience.
But I mean, that's quite a brave approach, isn't it? I mean, you know, people talk famously and win nothing with kids. As they all think that cliche that was proved wrong. But I mean, do you have to be a bit braver and a bit more patient with young players, or just if you got the top end ones, they're just, you know, they're going to provide anyway?
Well, we know they're going to make mistakes, but they all make mistakes, don't they? Football's a game of mistakes. So whether you're a player full of experience or whether you're a young player making your way, you're going to make mistakes. You know, it's just viewed in a different way. We had 3 centre backs last season. We had Ben Cabango, Mark Gilly, and Ben Wilmot. Benny's now senior for Wales. Ben Wilmot's playing for Watford, England under 21. Mark Gilly's playing for England under 21s. What 3 babies? He's only 23, I think, Fred, for the goalkeeper, which is really young. So if you put the older centre halves in, they're still going to make mistakes. It's just that if you put the youngies in, it's highlighted a bit more.
And what about in terms of like recruitment of players? Thinking about, you know, how to strengthen the squad. Do you get involved with that part of the game with the manager and the recruitment staff?
Yeah, we're all heavily involved. So we've got Andy Scott here, who's the head of recruitment. We've got ongoing discussions. Obviously, it's a bit difficult with the pandemic. You know, how do we meet and when do we meet? During the lockdown, we used to meet on a regular basis through Zoom, players' videos, etc. But yeah, there's a lot of responsibility from all the staff to look at players that we have the chance to maybe get in the building in the future. So it's not just left to 1 or 2 people, it's all our responsibility.
And where do you stand on this sort of like the idea about a way to play? Are you sort of do you think there's a certain way you should play football? I mean, you're lucky you played at, you know, Liverpool and West Ham, were big philosophies of, you know, playing football on the floor, playing, you know, possession type football, and you've worked at clubs. Do you think that's a really important part of your philosophy? And is there any danger? The question is really, you know, working in the Championship when, you know, times get tough. Is there time to compromise that?
Yeah, there's a time and place to play football. I'm not a football snob by any means. You know, if I'm going to watch a game or if I'm playing in it myself, I'd like the ball on the ground and I want to play football. But yeah, there's a time and a place. If people set up in a different way and want to crash it from back to front and play for seconds, they're well within their rights. We try and do it a different way. We try and play through the thirds, but that's our choice. That's our choice. But, you know, there is sometimes we have been a bit naive on 1 or 2 occasions where we tried to play when you need to clear our lines, but we're encouraging the players to play. You know, that's the play the way that we play.
And what about yourself? What's your own aspirations for the future? I mean, you've been in the assistant role a lot. Do you aspire to be the head coach?
$1 million question, that, mate. I'm 51 now, so I would suggest if I was going to go down the head coach manager's road, it'll need to be in the next 12 to 18 months. So I'll be getting to that point where I'll be considered too old. So watch this space, I think, mate. So I'm in no rush to take a different job. I love the one that I've got, but I'd never say never. As you can see from my varied CV, I'm not afraid of taking a challenge on in different areas. So if something became available and I thought, you know what, that'd be a real challenge and it interests me I might consider it. But in the meantime, I'm assistant manager at Swansea. Great football, great people.
And I mean, we talked a lot about the day in and day out on the grass. What's it like off the grass? The main challenges. We talked before. You said you're living away from your family in a flat in Swansea. You must have been similar in England, away from home a lot. What are the main challenges about that? Is the lifestyle of a coach seem very glamorous? I mean, what are the challenges around that as well?
Yeah, I think you can get away from the idea that the lifestyle of a coach is very glamorous, especially those who work away from home. Spend a lot of time on the motorway, to and fro. So it is difficult. My wife's based up north. I've got 2 older kids. I've got a grandkid and a grandkid on the way. So obviously, I'm a little bit isolated. I'm in Swansea. They're based in the northwest. So it's it's an ongoing and difficult challenge. But if you're a coach, it's very rare that you're going to spend your career on your doorstep. I was lucky enough as a player and a coach to spend a lot of time at Liverpool. Also, I'm aware that you have to work away sometimes. You have to take it on the chin. It's just the role that we're in. It's something that you have to accept.
And what would your advice be to a young aspiring coach who'd like to, have a great career in the game like yourself?
Do it because you love it. I love football. I really, really love football. Bit of a football anorak, really. Love talking about it, reading about it, watching it. It's as I've just said, it's not as glamorous as it's made out to be. And there's a lot of hard work put in. There's a lot of challenges put in your way every day regarding what you're doing in sessions, why did it work, etc., etc. It doesn't always go according to plan. So you've got to love it. You've got to love it because there's loads of knockbacks and setbacks and stuff that is not really highlighted that often. People just see the glamorous side of it. There's a lot of stuff in the background that you need to have a bit of resilience to get over. And if you love the game, that'll help you.
How do you develop yourself? How do you keep yourself fresh with new ideas and keep developing as a top-class coach?
I'm in constant dialogue with people at the FA. So the likes of Jamie Robinson, who's head of education at the FA. I've known Jamie for a long time since our Liverpool days. So he keeps me up to date on trends in the game, and we have conversations. The FA, they have days where you can go along and speak to the people like you're on a pro license or other pro license and what have you. So it's an ongoing education, football, isn't it? And I try and take as much as I can from as many people as I can.
Do you have anyone you look at in the game say, "Oh, look, those are like role models or people you look up to as top coaches in world football"?
Well, you're looking at top coaches in world football at the minute. You can highlight the one who's at Liverpool at the minute, who's done an outstanding job. But for me, it's more of looking at a team play and can we implement the way they play into the way we play? How can we transfer Champions League football into the Championship team, if you like? So so I admire all the coaches, I admire all the managers. It's a really difficult job, and there's some down who aren't at the top of the tree and at the top of the ladder, who are a little bit down the pecking order, who are outstanding coaches and don't get the credit they deserve. So you don't have to be at the top of the tree to learn from them. People have got brilliant ideas at all levels of football, and I'm open to taking them all on board because I'm a bit of a magpie in that respect.
And finally, what would your advice be to a young aspiring player who wants to have a career in the game?
Well, it'd be very much the same as a coach. It's not as easy as it looks. It's not an easy life being a footballer. There's lots of knocks and setbacks. The rewards are fantastic if you get to the top end. But in the meantime, especially for a modern football, there's lots of pitfalls that you've got to put up with. And, if you can accept that and enjoy it for what it is, if you can treat football as a senior like you did when you were a kid, you're halfway there because you're doing it because you love it, not because of the rewards that come with it.
Mike Marsh, thanks very much, mate. It's been fantastic. Appreciate your time.
All right, mate. No worries.
Cheers.